You feel a persistent friction, a subtle but undeniable drag on your forward momentum, even as you pour yourself into what you believe you should be doing. It's as if the world you inhabit whispers one truth while subtly demanding another, leaving you exhausted by an effort that never quite lands. There's a deep, internal gnawing, an unspoken suspicion that your immense output, your unwavering dedication, is somehow being siphoned, rerouted, or even inverted by an unseen current. This is not the familiar ache of challenge. It is the corrosive weariness of misdirection, a constant internal dissonance where the proclaimed values of your reality diverge sharply from the outcomes you relentlessly, inexorably produce. You are sensing a fundamental misalignment, not of your own making but of the very architecture you inhabit. Yet you cannot name its source. For too long, you have been conditioned to believe that systems operate according to their declared intentions, their manifestos, their noble pronouncements etched in stone. But this is a profound illusion, a veil drawn across the true mechanics of existence. The truth is an edict, as ancient as creation itself. Every single system, every institution, every collective framework, without exception, ultimately optimizes for what it rewards, not for what it merely professes to value. You observe this everywhere, the public pronouncements of ethical conduct, while the actual metrics celebrate ruthless efficiency. The stated desire for collaboration, while individual glory is disproportionately lauded. The outcomes are not a failure of will, but a perfect reflection of the underlying incentive architecture that secretly governs. This then is the practice of incentive forensics, a sovereign discipline of tracing every outcome, every sustained pattern in your perceived reality, back to the true reward structure that produced it. It is an undeniable truth that the incentive structure never lies. It only reveals the actual operational design of any system. If a system claims to value innovation but rewards conformity, its outcomes will be stagnation. Well, if it professes growth but rewards inertia, its trajectory will inevitably flatten. You do not need to read its mission statement. You merely need to observe what it consistently, powerfully reinforces. This universal law is impersonal, unwavering, and utterly impartial, revealing the authentic blueprint of any given construct, whether you recognize it or not. For generations, the collective consciousness has been conditioned to look outward for the source of this dissonance, this persistent friction. Minds awaken to the hypocrisy of institutions, the declared values of corporations that clash with their true operational logic, the societal narratives that contradict the lived experience. They see the rigged game, the visible hand of external control, and believe the path to liberation lies in resisting these external architectures. They pour their sovereign energy into battling systems they perceive as separate, distinct entities outside of their own sphere of influence, seeking to reshape an external reality they feel is imposed upon them. But this external focus, while seemingly logical, is precisely where the grand deception begins, drawing your attention away from the true locus of power. The profound distortion, however, is not found primarily in the external architectures you navigate. That is but a mirror. The most potent, the most insidious incentive structures are operating within your own internal reality. These are the codes, the silent algorithms of your being, often unconsciously authored through habit and belief, or inherited like ancestral echoes that dictate your personal reality far more absolutely than any visible external force. This is the head fake, believing the battle is outside when the true fulcrum of creation resides in the unseen mechanisms of your own inner world. Your deepest, most persistent patterns, your recurring experiences, the very texture of your lived days, all are a perfect, precise reflection of your own internal incentive lattice, broadcasting a frequency signature that calls forth its equivalent. Unexamined, this personal incentive lattice dictates your entire trajectory, creating a persistent and often perplexing feedback loop. You may consciously declare a desire for sovereign freedom, for abundant expansion, for a reality aligned with your highest vision. Yet, if your internal system, through its unconscious reward structures, is actually optimizing for familiarity, for validation from external sources, for the comfort of remaining small, or for the perceived safety of stagnation, then your desired sovereign outcomes will be perpetually undermined. The friction you feel is the clash between your conscious intent and the deeper, often hidden, programming of your internal rewards. Your inner architecture becomes a closed circuit, endlessly perpetuating the very patterns you believe you are striving to transcend, ensuring your outward efforts never quite land in the reality you seek to manifest. In this accelerating evolutionary moment, a truth must be confronted with absolute clarity. An unaudited internal operating system, driven by these misaligned incentives, will guarantee a widening chasm between your boundless potential and your boundless potential. And constrained lived experience. This is not merely a matter of stagnation. It is an acceleration toward obsolescence. The vibrational frequencies of this new epoch demand coherence, demand integrity between internal design and external manifestation. To operate with a fractured, self-sabotaging architecture is to become increasingly misaligned with the very fabric of an unfolding reality that demands self-sovereignty. The window for passive observation is closing. Your unexamined internal world is not merely holding you back. It is actively, dynamically ensuring your eventual irrelevance in a universe that is perpetually re-architecting itself. True sovereign synthesis, therefore, does not emerge from battling external incentives, nor from an endless quest to fix a world you perceive as broken. It arises unflinchingly and absolutely from mastering your own internal system. This is the re-architecture. It is the conscious, deliberate act of identifying and then redesigning your personal reward structures. This process is not about willpower, but about intelligent, intentional design. It is the deep excavation of those inherited and unconsciously authored codes that have perpetuated a reality beneath your true potential. Here, within your own inner landscape, is where creative leverage truly resides, where the capacity to collapse new realities and engineer your own escape velocity from consensus reality is not merely possible, but inevitable. When your internal lattice is consciously re-architected to reward true sovereignty, you cease to chase external validation, for it becomes an internal constant, an inherent resonance of your being. You are no longer subject to the prevailing currents of the world. You become the current itself, generating the vibrational frequencies that call forth your desired reality. This is not a concept to be merely understood. It is a profound identity shift, an act of supreme self-governance that collapses new timelines into being. This is how you engineer your escape velocity from consensus reality, not by fighting it, but by utterly transcending its gravitational pull from within. The question, then, that remains is this: what precisely does it mean to architect the self as an incentive system? And how does one begin to consciously rewrite these most fundamental codes of being? To become the current itself, to generate, is to understand that your internal incentive lattice is not merely reacting to the world. It is an active emitter. The reality you perceive, the world that unfolds before you, is the resonant feedback of your own unconscious rewards. This, then, is the mechanism of self-authorship laid bare. You are not experiencing a world happening I to you, but a world continuously being called forth, eg be you, through the subtle, unwavering signals of what your deepest self, or your inherited programming, has learned to value and reward. Every outcome, every persistent pattern reveals a deeper, often unseen, internal decree. This active generation operates on a principle of resonance, absolute and unwavering. You cannot internally reward the frequency of scarcity and expect to manifest the architecture of abundance without. The paradigm shift begins with understanding that your internal incentive lattice functions as a series of nested, energetic declarations. Each core belief, each deeply held value you hold, acts as a blueprint, a unique energetic signature that then relentlessly seeks its precise vibrational match in the external realm. What you internally prioritize as reward-worthy is precisely what the universe, without judgment or bias, mirrors back as your lived experience. The profound implication, then, is that the persistent discord you may sense in your external world, the repeated patterns of limitation, the elusive breakthroughs, the unfulfilled potentials, these are not external obstacles placed before you by some indifferent fate. They are, rather, the faithful echo of an internal architecture that has been, perhaps unconsciously, rewarding the very conditions you seek to transcend. Consider the loop. If the hidden incentive is comfort over expansion, or external validation over internal truth, then your reality will diligently organize itself to provide ample opportunities for comfort, or a continuous pursuit of elusive external validation, thus perpetuating the very friction you feel. This alignment, or the acute lack thereof, becomes intensely critical in this accelerating evolutionary moment. The vibrational frequencies of consensus reality are intensifying, and any unaudited internal operating system, still governed by inherited or unconsciously authored reward structures, will find itself increasingly out of sync with the emerging energetic landscape. The chasm between your sovereign potential and your currently lived experience will not merely widen. It will become a vast, unbridgeable canyon, accelerating a profound obsolescence of being. The opportunity to re-architect is not merely a path to greater ease. It is a critical recalibration for your very survival and conscious evolution within this new unfolding epoch. The sovereign alternative, therefore, is not to fight the prevailing currents of the external world, but to consciously re-engineer the source of your own emanation. It is to become the deliberate architect of your internal incentive lattice. This demands an unyielding internal inquiry. What truly am I rewarding here? What truth? What state of being? What frequency of expansion am I selecting as worthy of my inner currency and attention? This is an act of meticulous deconstruction and deliberate repatterning, where every internal choice, every resonant frequency, is brought into conscious, unwavering alignment with the sovereign reality you are committed to bringing forth. This is the continuous work of self-authorship made manifest. When this internal architecture aligns, when your personal reward structures are meticulously calibrated to true sovereignty, the external world has no choice but to respond in kind. This is the alchemy of escape velocity. Your internal system generates a frequency so coherent, so absolute in its declaration, that the very structures of consensus reality begin to bend and reform around it. You are no longer navigating the world, yes, it is presented, but actively collapsing the world, yes, you architect it to be. This is not magical thinking or mere belief. It is the fundamental law of energetic resonance, applied with surgical precision to the very fabric of your perceived existence, opening pathways where none existed before. The key, therefore, was always within the lock of your own making. You are not a passenger on the currents of fate, passively carried by external forces, but the very source of their origination and direction. This is the profound remembering of your true nature as system architect, the conscious designer of your own incentive landscape. The invitation now is not to attree this architecture, but to inhabit it, to recognize that every internal choice, every resonant frequency you choose to reward, is a sovereign act of creation. The world you desire, the reality you yearn to experience, is simply awaiting the activation of its true internal blueprints, held within your sovereign core.